what is the Harold Alphons Center, its benefits, and those folks that we're trying to upskill through incumbent worker training. So the Harold Alphons Center, what is the Harold Alphons Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce? It is a public-private collaboration in bringing together resources to help train Maine's workforce. Next slide. What we've developed is we've developed a workforce training center through a gracious gift from the Harold Alphon Foundation and has allowed us to develop what we call the Maine Workforce Development Compact. This compact is an agreement between the center, employers associations, and other organizations to help upskill frontline workers. And as the compact works, we are able to provide up to $1,200 and or 50% of the training costs per employee per year. This money is directed to frontline workers, and there'll be a definition that's going to come up here shortly about what the actual definition of a frontline worker is. Next slide. As you can see on this slide, this is what has taken place since January 22. We have facilitated training, and these are our training numbers through June 30th of this year. We've facilitated training to over 27,454 individuals in incumbent worker training. We've also provided training for entry level. So let me describe what the statewide impact looks like. We provide free training for pre-hire entry-level positions. We also provide incumbent worker training, and then we also provide scholarships to those incumbent workers that would like to get half off free community college courses. The center has been successful in reaching 95% of Maine's communities, and you can see the heat map showing all the dots in the areas that we've had projects take place in. Nearly half of Maine's workforce is represented with our compact membership. As of last week, we were somewhere around 1,760 plus compact members, and we've been able to deploy almost $10 million to those members for incumbent worker training. Our majority of our compact members are 100 employees or less, 75%, and nearly half of those are 50% or less, and really represents the fact that we are reaching small, medium, and large-sized businesses. As I said just a few minutes ago, the incumbent worker training through the Harold Alphon grant is there to help frontline workers, because frontline workers make up 82% of Maine's workforce. And what we discovered as we started working on the grant we're currently in is that about 80% of professional development training went to C-suite managers, supervisors, and only 20% went to frontline workers. And as we know, Maine's the oldest state in the nation. We have a lot of retirements, and those frontline workers need additional skills so they can move up into those positions and advance in companies. Next slide. This is the training investment that we've been involved in since 1994. We've had a traditional Maine Quality Centers and Put Me to Work program that we're running, and we're still running that program. It's for pre-hire training. We received our first Harold Alphon grant of $3.6 million between 18 and 2021. And that really started us in the place that we are here today. Currently, we're finishing out our second grant from the Harold Alphon Foundation of $15.5 million. And that's helped train incumbent workers and provided scholarships. And the exciting thing that we're talking about today is our new grant of $75.5 million. This new grant will train 70,505 Mainers. It'll help with pre-hire training, incumbent worker training, and scholarships. And this grant is an exciting movement for us as we help train up in our next grant almost 10% of Maine's workforce. Maine's population is only 1.3 million. We have about 700,000 folks that actually are working in Maine. So our new goal will touch 10% of Maine's workforce. Next slide. And why frontline workers? I described that before. Most of the investments across the country go to C-suite managers or supervisors, and training budgets really didn't help frontline workers. Again, only 20%. So this grant is designed around helping those frontline workers gain skills for advancement, possible promotions, and the ability to take additional positions as folks age out of their companies or associations or businesses. Next slide. I'll now turn this over to Charlie Collins, Executive Director of Workforce Training at the Harold Alfond Center. Charlie, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody. Good morning. I'd like to start by saying we're really excited to move this grant forward in a way where those training investment slides you saw earlier show us from our pilot stages through our current grant period and what we're excited to talk about, which is the next 5.5 years. So starting in January, we're embarking on this says essentially third round of Harold Alfond Foundation grants. What we've learned and what we're going to talk about between myself and Chris are sort of the same things that are going to continue in the grant, but where some changes are. And we're going to try to explain those over the next few slides with that. But I think it's important to understand, as you looked at that training investment chart, and where we are, I think we've gone from mere transaction and where we're heading and want to talk about with our compact members to go from mere financial transaction to being more transformational, and transformational in the way you look at your workforce, transformational in the way you're seeing the engagement of your workforce because you're helping with training. And that's a goal of ours. We want to move from, well, we know there are financial transactions that make up this program. We want to move to really understanding and you feeling more comfortable with understanding what it means to train your frontline workers and how that changes a transactional relationship with them into a transformational relationship, as well as with the organizations you're working with, whether it's a community college helping you train or one of the third-party training partners that you may have been using and will continue to use. So with that said, when we look at the training requests, and again, these are training funding requests we're talking about, we want to emphasize that these still will require you to be pre-approved. So that means there'll be a training funding application. And when you're thinking about, well, who am I putting a request in for? We're still looking for trainees who are Maine residents. They live in Maine and work for a Maine organization. You're training your frontline incumbent workers. Again, Dan alluded to the fact the non frontline workers are people in your C-suite and your top managers by title, maybe vice president and other areas. We feel there's funding, and most companies provide funding for those folks. The ones that don't necessarily get funding are your frontline workers who are on the front lines of in training as far as providing the product and or service you're delivering to people. Training that enhances an individual's skills and advances their careers. When we talk about this, what we are talking about are those areas where you can train a person where they can show demonstrable skills as a result of the training. What we will not be funding as we go forward are those annual trainings you provide that essentially provide policy about your company's policy. So you might have a safety training or sexual harassment training. Those aren't necessary skill building. Those are trainings that you're making sure your employees know your policy. Those trainings will not be funded going forward. So really be starting to think about what are the skill sets you want your frontline workers to have and put in those funding requests for those types of trainings. The other thing is training through Maine's community colleges are obviously still in place. A third-party trainer, or your own in-house training that you've put together and that you've conducted. All those can be reviewed and approved for training when you put them in. Again, under the X, we're talking about training for C-suite, Volunteers, board members, or elected officials will not be approved for funding training. That required annual training I told you about, that's more policy driven about your company's policies. We're not going to be funding those types of trainings. Reimbursement for travel expenses or employee wages, which was always part of the funding that we would not, that stays in place. We do not reimburse for travel expenses, employee wages. And of course, publication and subscriptions are not funded as quote unquote training for people. And then any non-professional development training that isn't related to their job or helping support the company. So we'll be reviewing all those applications and making sure it's a skill set that's supporting the industry you're in and the work that your employees are engaged in. So I wanted to just lay those out. And the next slide, please. What kind of training then? Well, we've always and will continue to fund to review applications for industry-specific training, whether it's in financial services compliance, training for employees in banking, as an example, role-specific training. You might have specific jobs and roles within your company, of course, will be considered and approved. What we call professional development for career advancement. You give the example of a medical assistant taking a course to earn a degree in nursing. Those certainly are allowable. Company-wide training. Again, you might have company-wide diversity, equity, inclusion training and things of that nature. Again, can help build knowledge and some skills to support your company. But again, policy trainings, again, we will not be funding those. Then those core skills and trainings, and the examples we put on this slide is training on dealing with difficult customers, conflict resolution, hospitality workers, and of course, training required for certification and licensure, your CPR training for childcare employees is an example given here. So again, there's a pretty wide level of training we have, and it really covers all industry sectors in a wide swath of the different industry sectors and the jobs within those. So why do we have to do a new memorandum of agreement or new MOA? That has to do with the fact that we're starting a new grant cycle covering funding between 2025 and 2030. We're updating our processes, as I've outlined a few of the tweaks we've made to the grant funding requests and processing, and we're creating a much more robust data collection. Our funders like to see what the dollars are being used for. This is data we collect and only report in aggregate, meaning only report with no specified details about an individual trainee. The only way we report things out are the larger numbers and not specific individual data to anybody. But that data is really important. The funders want to see the use of the dollars. Is it making a difference? And so because of these three key areas, we are putting out a new memorandum of agreement to all existing compact members and obviously new compact members. And with that, I want to just bring up some important dates. We will, as of December 4th, distribute that new memorandum of agreement through emails. And my colleague Heather Douglas has set up a system for you to receive an email with the ability to review the new memorandum of agreement, get it digitally signed and back to us. And then we will set a date and get that communicated to you by before mid-December, when you can start putting in new funding requests, or the 2025 funding year opens up, and that'll be in a date we'll get out to you very shortly in mid-December. And then January 1st, all the new requirements we're talking about in this session will start on January 1st and move forward out through that grant period through 2030. So with that said, I want to turn to my colleague, Christopher Winstead, our Deputy Executive Director for Training, to take you through the next slides. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Charlie. So what's staying the same? We're still going to have the $1,200 match per frontline worker per year. Reminder that that is a one-to-one match. So it's same level of funding. That's not changing the same dollar amount. Still going to be employer driven. This is very much driven by what you and your employees need. And really, as you heard Charlie talk about, these requests, really having them be part of a professional development opportunity for your employees and determining what the training needs to be and how it will be better engaged on your frontline workers. Same request process. So you ask and do require that funds are requested prior to the start date and that you submit completion data at the end of training. We are going to have some changes around the submission of the completion data, but we're still requiring that. And why that's important, that is an agreement that we have with our funder to be able to track all of the trainings and the completion rates and really get an understanding of how this has bettered the professional development of your employees. Dedicated support. We're going to have dedicated regional support from the workforce development coordinators. The same team is still around the state and will be there to support you. We will be adding to the team. And then the final piece is data collection will still be staying the same. So in addition to getting all of the completion data, we're going to be, having exit surveys and follow-up surveys. All three of these are a requirement of the grant. And that does not change. What's being updated? So we are moving to one payment as the grant. So Alphon 2.0, many of you will be familiar with the current level of payment we have where we did an 80%, 20%, 80% of the payment prior to the completion of training, and then 20% following training. Moving forward, we will be at one payment and it will be 100% at the end of training. What we're looking for is all of the data needs to be in within 45 days from the end date of training, and then we will release payment. We are going to regulate our funding. We have some pretty strict guidelines that we're meeting with Alphon 3.0 based off of annual funding opportunities, training numbers that we have, so individuals that we're looking to train with these dollars. So we will be regulating the funding. We have instituted a $250,000 annual employer cap. So what that means is any specific compact member, not individual, but compact member, the businesses, the cap is $250,000 per 12-month period. So that runs January to December. And then we do have the ability for businesses, for our compact members who are putting in their requests, to be able to include a 10% administration fee, and that's tied to each of those trainings. Why that's there? So if Chris is your employee and Chris is who you're submitting the compact member funding request for his training, there are certain things that you, the business and the HR department, have to be able to track, have to be able to keep track of the grades, enrollment information, all of the paperwork that you're doing. So we do allow up to a 10% administrative fee to be built in to each of those compact member funding requests. That is included within the 1,200, so it's not on top of the 1,200. And if you have questions on that, any of our workforce development coordinators can kind of help you walk through that process. We have a new grant management system that we're launching in 2025. We expect that will come on board in Q1, most likely mid to end of February. We are doing some additional deepening of relationships with our industry partners and really gearing up to do a lot more in the individual industry sectors. The scholarships are being updated with the dollar amounts and what's out there in terms of total numbers. And then finally, or additionally, we're also looking at deepening the relationship with our main community college campuses and all of our compact members. So really trying to get more of the customized training out to the businesses. So data collection, everyone's favorite topic and probably one of the most important ones in terms of meeting our metrics with our grant. As you heard me share, it is one of our grant requirements. So we have to be able to demonstrate the dollars that we used and the results that we built into the grant that we're meeting those. It does allow for aggregated reports, allows us to look at the total number of folks that we've served, the dollars that were spent, kind of what is reported out is at that high level. In terms of what we're going to be asking from you for each of your individuals is the same information that we asked before, right? So when that request comes in, it's for a specific level of training. We're going to be asking for the individual contact info for your employee who's receiving that funding to pay for their training. Why that's important. It allows us to be able to take both their information as well as the training information and develop a comprehensive learner record. That is a tool that is there for both you as the employer as well as your employees to be able to demonstrate what they've taken for trainings, what they've learned, what they've mastered. Becomes a really strong tool when you're looking at professional development and looking at opportunities for your workforce to be able to not only see what they have, but help picture them with themselves within progression through those positions and what are some of the things that are required, what's needed. We do ask that all of our participants take part in an exit survey. We want to be able to track data on those courses. And then we also do a 3 and 6 month or 3 or 6 month follow-up survey with them. And really that's a chance for us to say, okay, now that you've completed the training, what are some of the things that have changed within your career, changed within your employment potentially? And I'm going to turn it back to Heather.
Thank you, Chris. So what's next and what can you expect once you leave the call today and in the foreseeable future? The first is resources. We put together some support materials to help you with this transition, and we'll go over those in detail in the next slide. But please be aware that those are going to be emailed to you as well, so you don't have to rush to write them down. Number two is that new MOA. If you have not yet, there is a form that identifies who at your organization should fill out that MOA. And it will be included in the email, and it's the first item on the website. So I'd ask that you please fill that out so that we get it to the right person on December 4th, which is when the new MOA will be distributed. Please keep in mind that we do need to receive that MOA before you can request funding for 2025. We will be opening those 2025 funding applications in mid-December, and we will notify you by email when those are open. Number three, as Chris covered, we have a new grant management system coming in Q1 of 2025. If you're a frequent user of our compact funding, you'll notice some new forms on our website later this month. Please know that that is in preparation of our new system, and our ultimate goal is to make this process more user-friendly. And last but not least, we're always looking at ways in which we can bring additional value to our compact members, and we have a few initiatives planned for early 2025. The first is a survey in which we're inviting you to tell us exactly what would be beneficial to your organization in the workforce development realm. Number two, we are putting together a catalog of custom trainings that are available through Maine's community colleges. And as always, we're looking at ways in which we can serve you better and when those are available. And last but not least, looking at opportunities within those industry sectors to provide opportunity in building a pipeline from pre-hire training to incumbent worker training through professional development and scholarships. Here you will see that list of resources. There's a QR code and a bit.ly, but understanding that some organizations can't use those, the full website is the last bullet there. There you will find a copy of the MOA that is up right now so that you can read through it. Our goal is to have full transparency, and if you have any questions, that you're able to have those answered before the MOA goes live. And yes, I will share the URL in the chat in just a moment. But please reach out if you have any questions or if there's anything that wasn't clearly covered here. There's an FAQ document for questions that we've had come in that spell out the answers to those. This recording will be available, as well as a transcript in the email that goes out. And if you haven't accessed funding in a while, there are instructions on how you submit a funding request and what that process looks like so that you can review that as well. And as always, our workforce development coordinators are in your regions and are a great resource for you for any questions that you have. So with that, again, I'm going to drop the link in the chat and I'm going to open it up for questions.
And it might be helpful to mention, Heather, I'll mention, with any questions in the chat, we have two workforce coordinators, Kristen and Diane, is it Diane? Who will be alternately
Maureen.
Maureen, alternately moving between each of those questions to get questions answered in the chat. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have a few questions. The slides will be shared as well. Yes, Ashley. Michaela asked, will you still be covering university courses for employees who require a bachelor degree for the current position they are holding? I will kick that over to Charlie.
Yeah, and again, we'll find out if Maureen and Kristen are going to respond, but I'll go ahead and say yes, those are eligible for training, correct? Courses towards bachelor's degrees. Thank you.
Great. And Aaron asked, is it possible to receive more details on the updates of the scholarship offered through the compact? Yes, those details, as well as when the link is available, will be sent out for the 20, I can't believe I'm saying 25, 26 session. Priscilla asked, can you go into a little more detail on what does or does not qualify for compliance training, specifically EHAP, first aid, CPR, etc.?
I'm happy to jump in.
Okay. And
Yeah,
specifically for the construction industry. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly, first aid is a skill. Describing your policies annually that you do every year with people. First aids can be given annually if it's needed and updated because that's a skill that you can apply immediately. Things around your policies on, as I said, in the MCCS, we do an annual training for sexual harassment. We do an annual training for our general policies that we have to go through and understand our policies in the system. Those types of trainings, those two examples, would not be approved for funding going forward.
Heidi asked for the requirement that completion data is submitted within 45 days of the end of the training. What if we have not received approval for the training yet? Sometimes approvals are taking 60 or more days.
So great question. That's one of the reasons why we are in the process of building out RSM to streamline the approval process for the requests that come in to be more timely to our compact members. Heidi, we typically will work with our businesses in those periods where we might have ended up with a delay. We understand that that's on us in those scenarios. What we would ask from businesses is just to make sure that when you're putting your requests in, that they are coming in prior to the start of training. But we do expect that the new grant management system that we'll be deploying will allow for faster approval process. And if you ever have any questions about any of the requests that you've put in, please feel free to reach out to one of our workforce development coordinators.
And just to do a cover for that too, Chris, great answer to the question. All training must be pre-approved before the start of training. And if once the training is completed, there's a 45-day period to get the information in for us to make the payment. What we've experienced in the past is we've had some lags in that and has caused us some issues in projecting funding. So that's why we've instituted these new sets of guidelines so that we can fully deploy the resources.
Jackie asked, can you share more about in-house training? If we develop in-house training, how can we calculate the cost of training? Which Maureen has answered, but I'll bring it up here for everybody in case they're interested. Calculate the cost based on the trainer's time and any materials that are created. The grant does not cover wages for employees that are attending trainings. So thank you, Maureen, for answering that. Jackie asks, are C-suite automatically ineligible, or does it depend on the size of the organization and whether this is a learning opportunity that could result in advancement? Charlie?
Oh, okay. Yeah. No,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. No, C-suite are automatically ineligible for that training. Where you may say, okay, I'm a one-person owner of a company. I am the CEO, I'm the president, I'm the chief bottle washer. We will allow that person to put training funding in for themselves. So when it comes to larger companies, so those smaller, that small one-person company is okay to put for training requests, and most, if not all, would be approved. But it's as you get larger and you clearly have a demarcation from the people who own the company, run the company, from your frontline workers. We want the dollars to go to the frontline workers.
Great, thank you. And an additional question here about updates on the scholarship offered through the compact. Kristen Weigand, one of our workforce coordinators, has answered it, and I'll share it here. So with scholarships are available for any of our 3-credit or more courses through Maine's community colleges. The scholarships are 50% of tuition and fees. And this is above and beyond the allocated $1,200 per person for compact funding training. So we'll include more information on that as well. And then I think, Charlie, this goes back to the piece on C-suite. Our single operator owners qualify for training for themselves.
That is correct. And Maureen answered affirmatively, yes. And that has been the case in this last grant and will continue to be the case going forward.
And apologies as things are answered. They are moving around on my screen a little bit. I just saw something come in about a link for sharing more information with the scholarships for employees. Absolutely. We are working on the form for next semester, and we will share that out with all compact members once that is available, as well as the details. And then I will ask the entire team here, Michaela asks, sorry, I found it. Michaela asks, what exactly defines a frontline worker? All of our employees are DSPs and are frontline workers as needed. So I think Chris.
So any of your employees who are DSPs are, by the nature of their positions, frontline workers. They're working with your clients. So they are at that point where they are the boots on the ground representing your organization and working with those individuals. So yes, those DSPs would count as frontline employees.
Thank you, Chris. Is professional coaching eligible for reimbursement? I'll refer to.
I'll jump on, Chris. So I've had a couple discussions with them. I know it's called coaching, but when I had to ask or dig into this, I ask, is there training happening? And I guess the best answer is if it's yes, then it's fine. And so, what's in a term? There's a big difference there. But if there's skill sets being transferred from the coach to the person being coached, then that is allowable. So you got to be able to define the skill sets you are transferring or giving in that coaching environment.
So Charlie, an example of that would be if I'm receiving supervisory coaching because I'm a new supervisor and someone is training me on how to be a better supervisor. That's easily covered because it involves training with it, as opposed to if I'm receiving coaching based off of budget projections and stuff, and it's not necessarily training attached to it, but rather just someone looking over my numbers, very different.
Correct.
Because it's not tied to a defined training path for that person.
Correct.
Thank you. And Krista asks regarding the C-suite, if it's a smaller agency whose COO and clinical director are licensed clinicians, who do clinical supervision and client work, or who do clinical supervision and client work, would they be eligible despite the title? So would they be considered frontline if it was within healthcare? And Kristen has responded here, if they are performing everyday duties as a frontline worker or covering for one that they supervise, then yes, you can submit funding requests for them. Ellen asks, is there a site where we will have access to track the approvals and payouts? Chris?
So Ellen, as soon as our new grant management tool comes online, there will be a platform that all of our compact members will be able to see where their requests are in the approval process. And also be able to see when the payments have been issued. That will require, and this is a little bit of a change, the new grant management system, which we will be doing training on as soon as it launches or prior to its launch, will require company sign-on, which means each of the registered company points of contact will have a sign-on. They'll be the ones who will be able to go in and put those requests, but they will also be the ones who will be able to see the dashboard on that.
And Cheryl asks if compact members are still able to submit for 2024.
As long as training has not started. So if you have training that's starting between tomorrow and December 31st, we can take those requests. Remember that a training request has to come in and you need pre-approval prior to the start of training. We cannot pay for training that has already happened.
Yeah, and I'll just put a caveat on this. We are finishing out our current grant cycle that ends here in the next 30 days. So only if funds are available. We have new funding available starting after January 1st.
And Cheryl, the links and the process is outlined in the resource that I will share with you, or that website that we'll share with you. Brittany asks, will the new grant management software allow employers to have a dashboard and pull reports? So I'll stop there, Chris.
So, Brittany, I'm guessing what you're probably asking is a report of all of the funding that has been covered for a given calendar year. And yes, my understanding is that we will be able to pull a report. The $1,200 per person is per calendar year, not per training. So what you'll see is and it's high level because I still need to see the final piece of it. You'll see the training request that's gone in. You'll be able to see what was funded and the detail that's attached to what was funded, and should also give you the ability to see the $1,200 per employee for each year as well.
And Bethany asked, is $1,200 per person total for a calendar or per training? Wondering if the same person can participate in different trainings throughout the year, and should we be tracking their total cost? Either Chris or Charlie, if you want to.
So the 1,200 limit is per calendar year, and it's tied to an individual within a compact member. So in other words, if Chris Winstead works for Heather's consulting company, Heather can put in a request. My max is $1,200 for 1 year. That can be through one training. And remember, it's a match. So realistically, what that means is that Heather's investing $2,400 for my training. $1,200 of it comes from Heather's company. $1,200 of it comes from the Alphon funding. That can be for one training, or that can be through a myriad of trainings throughout that calendar year. Again, January 1st to December 31st, for as long as we have funding for each of those years, those compact member funding requests can come in.
Which, Heather, if I could go back to Michaela York's question, and I can answer that. Will funds also apply to grad courses, again, if the higher degree is required for the position? So again, thank you for that, Michaela. The way we would review those requests is that person requesting grad degrees higher than bachelor degrees, is the job considered a frontline job? And if so, I'll give you an example. A school teacher often has to go beyond the bachelor's to earn a master's, even maybe in an administrative role somehow with the school system. So yes, those requests would be approved for those master degree level requests as well. Still limited to $1,200 per year, and that's a match. So remember, when we say 1,200, all organizations are matching all their requests up to 1,200 or more, because they could be paying more than 50% if it's more expensive.
Thank you, Charlie. And I think the last question that I have showing up on my screen, Aaron asked, for courses at community colleges, will employers receive a notification when the funds are sent to the community college for payment by the compact team?
So from our early conversations with the organization that's pulling together our grant management software, we have asked for those communications to go out to both the college, so the finance departments at the college, as well as the students. I will add the question about, in that scenario, if the notification can go out to the employer. I think what would have to happen is there would have to be probably a box checked that the employer is the one who is actually financially responsible for that. But I think, I will ask that question to our software developer.
Great. And with that, are there any additional questions? And just saw one come in. Does the student and or employer need to pay the tuition bill up front and then they get reimbursed at the end of the semester? Is that the process?
You're talking to again, either using stage two, whoever they're quote unquote getting their training from's payment policies are, whether it's a traditional college or a private training provider, you would simply follow your training provider's billing areas. And as we've said, we're funding 100% after you complete the training. So if it's a 15 credit course, a 15-week credit course, you wouldn't submit that completion for 15, 16 weeks after the course. And then you have up to 45 days to get in the information that the course was completed, and your 100% payment of that request will go out at that point.
So just to confirm, Charlie, for scholarships to our community colleges, that they should pay tuition up front and then they'll get the 50% when they've submitted completion.
Correct.
Okay. Ellen says, I oversee 5 companies. When I receive a notification, a company name is not listed. Going forward, is it possible to include the company name in any notification?
I can make that request as we're doing discovery and build out with RSM.
Yeah, this is great feedback, guys. Thank you. And then we'll leave it open for a few more minutes if you have any questions. Obviously, we have our full team here to answer, so please take advantage of that time. Your coordinator's information will also be included in the email that goes out. If you don't already have an existing relationship with them, certainly reach out. They can help you throughout this process, whether it's the first time you're submitting a funding request or if you're hung up somewhere. And yes, slides will be sent out to everybody that attended today in that email. Okay, seeing no more questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have this new grant funding to continue this work through 2030. And you have an amazing team here to help you with that. So thank you.
Thank you for everybody for attending.
Take care.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yes.